welcome everyone to this new panel on independent thought. We are talking today about the Ukraine crisis, and I brought you a great host of panelists to join us for this discussion today. First off, we're gonna have everyone introduce themselves, say their political leaning and what they do, whether it's podcaster, streamer, or if you're running for office. So tell us a little bit about yourself. We're gonna start with my left here. Fresh faces, new ideas. Tell everyone a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Hi, I'm Fresh Faces New Ideas. I am a SOCDEM birding bro. I stream on Twitch under Fresh Faces New Ideas. Monday, Wednesday, Friday-ish, 7:30 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. EST. I guess I'm doing these panels more often now. You can also find me on Twitter at Faces Ideas.
All right, nice, short and sweet. Appreciate it. Endless Cemetery. Why don't you go ahead and go next?
I'm Endless Cemetery. I'm a Black anarchist based in Baltimore. A lot of my content is focused on studying the work of the Black Panthers, not just the self-defense aspect that everyone focuses on, but also the radical care aspect. I liken myself to those type of revolutionary vibes. I also talk about the Real News and Eddie Conway, who's from here a lot. And I play video games. I'm a fighting game player. I play Mortal Kombat 11. I'm one of the best Jax players in the world, apparently. But yeah, that's about it.
All right. Thank you. Next, I want to introduce James Boyad.
Hi, everyone. My name is James Boyad. I'm running for Congress up here in Montana for District 2, running against Matt Rosendale on the Republican ticket, and hoping to try to bring a little bit more truth and transparency to the mix, and trying to cut out some of the corruption that's pretty well plagued the political world. So nice to meet everyone, and thank you guys for coming.
All right, appreciate you being here. Next is No Justice.
Hey, yeah, so I'm No Justice. My channel is No Justice MT. Where is it? Fucking there it is. So it's in the bottom. There you go. I'm No Justice MTG. I stream on Twitch and YouTube. I talk about British politics and American politics and things like that. I'm a Marxist, trade unionist, like SOCDEM in the streets, Marxist, communist in the tweets. But I mostly do cover just kind of general news and politics. I respond to a lot of anti-trans stuff on my channel as well, being transgender myself, pronouns she, her, and yeah, so if you want all of the socials, that there is the handle. Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, wherever you want to go. All right, and next we got Hardwood and Sock.
Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm a retired Twitch politics streamer. I come out and make my appearances every once in a while. You'll see me in a bunch of chats, all over the place, from the drama streamers to everyone else. But I feel like this is a very important topic. So here I am. Thanks for having me. Oh, and I'm center right.
All right. And last but not least, a la carte Hex. Welcome to the panel.
Hey, everyone. So I guess I myself haven't streamed a whole lot in a while. I stepped away to finish my education and sort of, myself sort of read up on things so that I don't make a fool of myself when I do debate on topics that I don't necessarily have, life experience on and stuff like that. But now, because, okay, I guess so now into the second part of my background. So basically, I was born and raised in Ukraine, and I am in my last semester of getting a master's in international relations. So basically, I felt like I had to weigh in on this discourse in particular and give my opinion. So that's the reason why I'm here. That's also the reason why all of my shit is broken. I haven't streamed in a long time, but I'm looking forward to a productive discussion with all of you. And I'm somewhere, I guess, in the SOCDEM ballpark, though. Lately, it's been really weird.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for introducing yourself. And let's get right into it. So our first topic for today, which had pulled up here, terrible host. Okay. So what should the US and other Western countries' involvement be now that this war has broken out? I'm sure that anyone who's here watching the stream doesn't need really an introduction. Everyone kind of knows Russia has invaded Ukraine. It's been going on for about a week and a half now. Thousands of people, I guess, have, either been killed or injured. It seems like over 1 million people have fled Ukraine into neighboring nations, Russia, Poland, Romania. So what is the next step for these Western nations that we find ourselves in, the US, the UK? I'm going to open this up actually to my right here with Endless Cemetery. What do you think that the Western involvement should be going forward?
I would say, given what my politics are, I believe that if anything, it should only be just like aid in terms of like, you know, food supplies, that sort of thing. I am staunchly anti-war, so that's kind of where I come from on there. But yeah, I don't want to see any type of no-fly zones, anything like that. I don't want to see any type of active engagements through NATO or anything like that. I feel like the consequences of that would be pretty cataclysmic. But aside from that, yeah, send food, send supplies, send everything that can be sent that's needed according to the needs of the Ukrainian people. And that's about it.
All right. Next, we want to go over to James Boyette. What are your thoughts on this? What should the West's involvement be now that this war has begun?
So I think the biggest thing that we need to do is, I agree with providing aid. For my specific point of view, I think the aid should be a little bit more than just the food and supplies, but the necessary military resources to protect the Ukraine citizens when it comes to everything that's going on. I mean, Ukrainians are already struggling quite a bit with making sure that they've got the anti-tank, anti-aircraft weaponry. And the big thing that I think that the US and NATO should implement more than anything is a similar system to the Iron Dome over in Israel to at least prevent some of these cruise missile strikes and save the innocent civilian populations more than anything. And on a little bit more of a step up is Putin needs some sort of pushback. And I'm not saying that US and NATO needs to jump into the mix, but we need to draw a line of, hey, you wanted a deal where Ukraine wasn't going to be a part of NATO, and we adhered to that agreement. And based on the Budapest memorandum that you yourself had agreed to back in the 90s, you violated that memorandum. You invaded Ukraine, and you're trying to take away their freedoms and liberties, and you're killing quite a few people in the meantime. And where I think the US and NATO could step up a little bit more is draw a line in the sand and be like, hey, either you withdraw your troops and stop killing innocent people, or the US and NATO will bring Ukraine into the NATO alliance, and you will then have the full support of NATO. And that's what you're going to have to compete against in terms of the way that Putin's kind of looking about things right now. He's already seeing the sanctions as an act of war by the US. And unfortunately, that's kind of something that we can't go back on, and we can't go back and erase history and try again. So I think the biggest thing that we can do now is try to take preventive measures to stop this invasion from continuing and try to put more pressure on Putin to stop the invasion, stop the killing, stop all of it.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your answer. I next want to kick it over to No Justice. What is your opening statement on this topic?
So I think the main concern that I have is anything that would lead to an escalation of the conflict. So NATO involvement militarily, by boots on the ground, is something that's obviously a red line that we should not be crossed. I'm happy with what is being going on with regards to levels of humanitarian aid, engaging in the supply of military technology and the supplying of arms with which the Ukrainian people can defend themselves. I have no disagreement with what's been going on there. That seems absolutely fine to me. But the issue is that anything with regards to a no-fly zone in that sense is also, tantamount to a declaration of war against Russia regardless, and that would also lead to conflict escalation and further NATO involvement, which should be avoided at all costs. With regards to what we should do from an economic angle, the issue I have at the moment is a lot of sanctions have been done with regards to tank the actual Russian economy itself rather than attack specific members of the Russian oligopoly, which has control over the kind of political system with regards to what happens within Russia. Like most capitalist states, it is an oligopoly, and the whims of a select few members of their oligarch class are the people who control most of the strings with regards to that. So incredibly performative things such as not including Russian teams in FIFA is essentially the same thing as refusing to play Robert Mugabe at cricket, like what happened with Zimbabwe, right? It's pointless and performative, and all it does is make life worse for the regular Russians who, as we've seen from the footage online, that are completely against the war. Like this is not something that the people have democratically decided to engage in. This is one man's desire for additional territory and to, essentially try and bait the West into engaging in further military conflicts to try and destabilize what's happening with regards to the Eastern situation in Europe. Whereas what I would rather see is a hardline sanctions against the oligarchs in Russia. Like, for example, the $600 million yacht that belongs to one of the Russian oligarchs has been impounded in Germany, has been confiscated by their state, which I think is what we should be doing. Especially being from the UK, London is essentially the Russian money laundering capital of the world. They own so much of property in London, which has led to an incredibly large homelessness crisis in my country specifically. Owen Jones on daytime TV in our country, one of the kind of leftist political commentators who gets the most kind of airtime apart from Ash Sarkar, was saying that, well, we should just confiscate this property. As far as I'm a Marxist, I don't give a shit about property rights regardless, but like, if we're gonna at least do something, confiscating the property that belongs specifically to Russian oligarchs doesn't really affect the actual populace of Russia. And he was saying we should use that to be able to house Ukrainian refugees when they come to the UK in these properties that are being confiscated and requisitioned from the Russian oligarchs. Hit them where it hurts, stop hitting the regular people, and avoid escalation at all costs.
All right. Very poignant. I love it. Alucard Hex, you were born and raised in the Ukraine. I can't wait to hear what you have to say about this topic. What is your specific idea for what the West should do next now that this conflict has started?
I think we should nuke Russia right now. But I guess if we're getting serious, I would say I am pro essentially all kinds of aid, humanitarian, military. Obviously, I think right now is like one of the most important points in the war, so right now we have something where United States can't quite like push the jets through from like Poland and Romania and Bulgaria and all that. So I think, if there is ever a time to do it, now is the time, because, Russians seemingly their like blitzkriegs have failed a little bit. So you could really catch them off balance. So I think now would be the best time to do it. And I'm a little bit disappointed that has not come. In terms of the no-fly zone, I think, okay, this is going to be a hot take, but I think a no-fly zone is actually okay. I don't know if I should go into the reasoning right now, or I guess I'll give like a quick rundown. Basically, I don't really think Putin has responded to deterrence whatsoever at this point. And sort of, if you're like counterbalancing like nuclear holocaust with a military intervention, I think that sort of drawing the line at where NATO starts is kind of strange, because when the stakes are that high, like what makes you think that NATO is going to defend Estonia any more than it does Ukraine? Like if the outcome that you're afraid of is nuclear annihilation, that like what makes you think that like piece of paper is going to hold up? Because once again, it's not NATO that has nukes, it's France, it's Britain, it's the United States. So are they really gonna like go all in for places like Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania? I don't really know. So to me, like, it might be sensible to just stop it, basically, as soon as we can. Once, as long as we have some kind of an advantage. That's sort of my take. And lastly, on the sort of like weird virtue signal sanctions, I would agree that they're sort of pretty cringe at times. But on the other hand, I can sort of see value in essentially demonstrating that the Russian government has like really, really fucked up, where optically they're just hated on all fronts, and sort of to, carry that message to the Russian people that, okay, listen, the propaganda that you see on TV is really just complete horseshit. Like, this needs to stop. So yeah, I don't know. Yeah, so basically on the virtue signals, I'm a little bit 50-50.
All
That's
right.
about it for now.
Thank you for that. I see that we will not have such a agreement within the panel as we did last night. So, Sock, you are next. What is your thoughts on what the Western involvement should be?
I think it should just pretty much be what it has been, where we are providing humanitarian aid. We're providing Stinger missiles, as far as the US goes. Like, I wouldn't stop at just humanitarian aid, but I wouldn't go as far as saying we should be sending jets into Ukraine. I think like it needs to be somewhere in the middle. A no-fly zone is a non-starter for me. I think we need to try to avoid World War III at all costs. I think we're kind of caught in like a very tough position because, Ukraine is not part of NATO. So if we, just go in there and defend them, right? Well, it's just like now we're playing the world police again without like necessarily an alliance, whereas if they do invade, Latvia, Estonia, Romania, well, they're already part of the alliance. Like they're entitled to Article 5 protection, right? So like, and if we don't come to their aid, then we have like a real big issue, like, and as far as like the virtue signaling, sanctions, all right, cool. Like that's all fine and dandy. Like if you want to ban Russia from all the sports, that's fine. But, you have Alex Ovechkin, right, who's an NHL player in the United States, who's basically getting criticized just because he's Russian. And it's like, well, he says no war. He says he doesn't want war. Like, why are we attacking him, right? We don't need to attack all Russians over this, like it's not all of their fault, right? It's Putin's fault and his, counterparts. Like, but at the same time, I do agree with the sanctions that we have done, right? Which would actually end up hurting the Russian people. I think that that's kind of going to entice the people to rise up, and hopefully, take down, internally, Putin. With enough public pressure, public pressure goes a really long way. Now they're doing like the propaganda campaign, like all they can, but like, I think that we can't just be like, oh, we're only going to do it to the oligarchs and Putin. No, unfortunately, it has to be to everybody. And, I'm really encouraged to see all the protesters in Russia that aren't afraid of getting arrested, because they're all going to get arrested, and keep trying to stand up and keep trying to get that message out. But, like I said, Russia has a really strong propaganda campaign, but we just need to hold strong. Also, I don't believe that we should be, stopping the import of oil from Russia at the moment, because I don't think that the world could actually handle that. I know we only get a little bit of oil from them here in the United States, but a lot of places in the EU get a lot more proportionally, so which then if they stop getting oil, then they need more of our supply of oil. And then it just causes like a global oil crisis. So I think what we're doing right now is good, and I'll leave it at that.
All right. Finally, Fresh Faces, New Ideas. Round us out here with your perspective.
Look, I think right now with the apparently 4K protesters today have been arrested. I don't know if that's just overall or just individually today in Russia. But like I think right now we have to focus a little bit more on the humanitarian aid. I was seeing the reports today. I'm not sure entirely how accurate they are because, you know, everything's kind of funky. I don't think that the corridor that they agreed to yesterday even held to get civilians out. Which, I mean, if they're not even going to agree to that, we have to like figure out a better way to get the civilians out, at least the ones who want to leave. Like there was a 3-hour piece that they said like just let them out, and apparently they just kept shelling the city, so that didn't make any changes. I think we're doing more or less the right thing. We figure out the planes with Poland to send the planes in. I think if we're able to supply better planes, that would lessen the need for an actual no-fly zone, especially if they're planes that the Ukrainian army can fly, which is, I believe, what we're sending them now. Because that's really the reason for the no-fly zone is they don't have the air capacity to fight back, and that's really where most of the civilian deaths are going to come from is the carpet bombing. As for the sanctions, I agree with pretty much everyone on the sanctions that we have to target them at both the overall economy in a way to show them that we can like really hurt the people at the top, but it also has to be the people to rise up as well. Obviously, some of them are a little nonsense. I think today both TikTok and Twitch ended in Russia because of their crackdown on free speech. I think that's kind of a mistake because they're already going to crack down on those things anyway, and having the ability for both people inside of Russia to argue against what's happening and for people outside to have conversations with people inside of Russia allows for a larger like an uprising movement that isn't controlled by their state media that they are expanding right now. So things like that, things like stopping cats, the Russian cats are being in the competition's nonsense. And like, I think the point Zach made about not all Russians is a really important point. Like when we saw like that first week with the banning of Russian vodka, which doesn't even come from Russia half the time, or the attacking of Russian bars. Like we've been through this like every time. Like we're gonna start renaming Russian vodka Freedom Vodka or something like we do with the French fries. Like this is not going to be effective, and it's not like there are bad outcomes to this. We've seen it. There's the kind of nonsense ones with the Freedom Fries, or there's like the Islamophobic anti-Asian sentiments we've seen after the coronavirus and 9/11, where they were like getting physically assaulted, and that's something we have to like clearly define that the difference is here.
All right. Well, I appreciate everyone's opening statement here. I'm going to open up the panel to anybody who wants to respond to anyone else's points. You know, you can be contentious, but be civil. So go ahead and open up to anyone who wants to speak first.
I just wanted to push back on this idea that engaging in wholesale economic sanctions against Russia is going to theoretically lead to some kind of future regime change due to public outcry and public uprising. Like Russia is an autocracy, it's an oligopoly, it's entirely controlled by people at the top. There's no democracy to speak of with regards to what's happening in Russia. And at the very least, the main opposition, the CRPF, are also in favor of the invasion and of recognizing the sovereignty of the DPR and the LPR. There's no this idea that there's going to be the sanctions are going to be so brutal upon the people of Russia, they're somehow going to be able to oust Putin out of nowhere. When at the end of the day, that decision will solely lie, as far as I'm concerned, with the people with the political and financial power to be able to remove Putin of their own regard, which is the people at the top, which is the oligarchs. Which is why I disagree with a lot of the. I mean, I understand that some level of wholesale economic sanctions has to take effect. I don't necessarily disagree with removing Russia from SWIFT and engaging in sanctions against Bank and places like that. I get that. And that will have some effect, but things like MasterCard and Visa pulling out of Russia and wholesale, that mostly is just going to affect people on the ground as far as I'm concerned. And I don't think that these things should be what we're focusing on at the time. And I think the claims that wholesale economic sanctions will lead to some kind of popular uprising, I think is
it's an accelerationist argument.
I mean, I don't think that this is necessarily something that's going to take place in Russia in 2022 right now.
Yeah, but like with MasterCard and stuff pulling out, how much is that based on sanctions, or is that like general public pressure? Like I feel like that's kind of like the step up from like the black square during the Black Lives Matter protests. It's kind of corporations like thinking that they have to do something when really they're making things worse. Like I think, and especially the thing is you have to watch them. Like sometimes they'll say it and then they'll like keep doing it. or they'll stay in there. Like I think that's a thing we can keep in mind as well. Like I think Coke is one of the corporations that's still staying in Russia, and people are like, well, I'm going to boycott Coke now. It's like, why? They're still kind of doing the right thing. So no, I agree with you. I think the states that are doing the sanctioning is one thing. I think if you're a corporation, you have to like really think about what you're doing, because a lot of time it's not really worth it for you to say anything about it either way.
Yeah, no, I get what you mean. I get what you mean. Because the other issue is, I think that one thing we're missing as well is one of the reasons for the financial sanctions isn't just to cripple Russia so much that the Vladimir Putin gets excised from power. It also, once the money runs out, the war cannot continue. This war is costing them huge amounts of money every single day that it continues. The intention at the start was for a quick kind of blitzkrieg on the territory of Ukraine, to try and overrun them quickly within the first few days, and that's clearly not happened. It was clearly the wrong time to engage in the conflict, and weather conditions, and there's a long thread that we could go down there. But one of the reasons for the economic sanctions on a kind of large state level is to try and cripple the state financial system so much that they cannot engage in war any further, because they're just due to not being able to afford it. They don't have the financial backing. Even places like China aren't backing them financially in the war at the moment.
Yeah, and like so, but when you do sanction the entire state, it's going to trickle down into the people as well.
Oh yeah,
you know what I mean. So naturally, like the general population of Russia will always be hurt by the sanctions that we're doing, right? So it's almost like it's almost coming across like, what are you going to do? Are you going to not sanction the entire state, which would still hurt the people? Or, like you can't just sanction the oligarchs and Putin. You know what I mean?
I understand that. Yeah.
So it's kind of like while yes, it would be great to like not hurt the Russian people, it's just going to be a natural byproduct of what like basically all we can do at the moment without putting boots on the ground.
Well,
I understand that. Yeah.
The other thing is also, No Justice is right. Like, there's so many states like America and like she was talking about London that have just been money laundering Russian money. Like going after that, like it's really cool because the yacht is like a really noticeable thing that you can like see and they can talk about that you're stealing or that you're repossessing. But if you like going after apartment buildings or housing or whatever else they have their money in, and you have like you're going after that, that's where it's going to hurt. So you have to apply it both ways, because even if you're not going to sanction directly the oligarchs, going after the money laundering should open up. And this is going to be a fight because there's a lot of investment in all of these countries to like protect this money because they've made all this money.
Right.
I mean, there was the.
Yeah, so hold on really quickly, everyone. Sorry.
I'm just going to say really quickly here. We haven't heard from Endless, James, or Alucard. Go ahead and just jump in if you guys want to. Also,
can I clarify one thing? Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead and clarify.
Just want to clarify and say that I'm just to my previous point. I understand that there is going to be some level of material harm done to the regular populace of Russia. I'm fully aware that is going to happen. It needs to happen at least somewhat. My point is to try and minimize that as much as possible. Right? If just to make it clear. Right.
I also want to add a little bit into this conversation here. From the reporting that I've been seeing coming out of like the Intercept in particular, it seems as though I think the word they used was the opacity of our financial system, especially like here and in the UK, has kind of allowed for so many Russian oligarchs to kind of like hide their money within our system here, and it's been very hard for our governments to even track down this money. So even if they wanted to really go after everyone, they're having a very difficult time even finding the money. So it might not be as simple as being like, oh, let's go get their money and seize all their assets, so on and so forth. But
there was a massive piece like 3 months ago about where all of the world's biggest shell corporations. One of them was in like North Carolina.
But the problem with the shell corporations is that you can't always track down owners of shell corporations.
If there's I imagine if you're going to start with it, the massive set of reportings that have already occurred would be a pretty good way to do it.
I'm sure that they're on the case.
Nah, they don't want that, because there's also the fact that like the top 10 Russian. This is why it's weird whenever we use the word oligarch to refer to like Russian billionaires, is because like Elon Musk and what's the bald dude's name who was in
Jeff
space
Bezos.
with our money? Yeah, they have combined more money than the top 10 Russian oligarchs. So it kind of seems baked into the cake for me. That's really the only point I have there. Everything else I've been hearing, I've been kind of agreeing with. The only thing I would really say is to clarify my earlier point. I would definitely, I don't know if it came across that I agree with like sending weapons and munitions and so on and so forth for the Ukrainian people to do self-defense. But yeah, I'm on that same boat as well. But yeah.
All right. If I can comment on the, I guess on the particular targeting for sanctions, I guess I don't super believe in a like a purely like oligarchic sort of overthrow. I can't quite articulate why. I guess for one, it might be because, you know, if you essentially don't replace the system, then like there's a decent chance that everything's just going to stay the same way. But I guess to sort of, in terms of the effectiveness angle, I believe that the most effective revolutions are ones that combine popular support and backing from strong opposition groups, because that's sort of what happened in Ukraine. Although the Yanukovych government was in power, was corrupt as fuck, there were a lot of opposition groups that disliked them and were willing to bankroll the protesters. So that's, I think, a large part of the reason why that revolution worked. So I think if we can get something similar going in Russia, I think that would be the most effective way to overthrow Putin. Because right now, if you go out and protest, you just, you know, you get your ass beat, you get thrown in jail for a month, and I don't know, your life only gets worse. But
yeah.
if you can at least, you know, offer them some protection, some money for their troubles, I think it would be a lot easier for people to go out, because, you know, that's really, Russia is a robust police state. So a lot of people are really afraid to like of being fucked up like big time. And, you know, I can acknowledge that. So I think if we can alleviate those concerns a little bit, I think that would be nice.
Yeah, I mentioned this on a panel last night. So I think I'm going to mention it again in this one. I had someone reach out to me on Instagram who has friends like currently in Russia who tried sending money to their family members in Kharkiv. And the Russian government actually blocked the transaction and questioned them for possibly being a traitor. So it does seem like Russia has a pretty tight control over any and all like transactions going on in Russia right now. Putin notoriously has complete control over state TV, or most of state TV. They've basically squashed all independent voices, you know, in that country right now. So it's a pretty bleak situation for
I don't
the people
think
of
they're
Russia
particularly
right
unique in that regard, though. Honestly,
now. No, they're not unique, but it's their current reality.
Oh yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
That's why like, oh, James, you go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, you go. I was talking a lot already.
So, kind of agreeing with what you guys were saying, in terms of kind of backing the people of Russia. Really, at this point, the only way to address the Russian oligarchy is for basically a full-blown revolution to take place. And if you take, for example, Elon Musk with the Starlink, if he can expand that to the people of Russia, give them access to media that's not going to be blocked by the Russian government. I mean, China's doing the same thing. They're blocking Facebook, they're blocking Twitter, they're blocking all these things that allows the people to get any sort of outside perspective or any sort of outside help. So implementing some sort of system like that, expanding this Starlink project to give the people of Russia a little bit more kind of fuel to the fire is definitely going to help quite a bit. On the flip side to that, the importing of Russian oil, that is emboldening the Russian government and providing them with more money to funnel into their military. And that's something that I know for a fact China is not going to stop anything there. I mean, Putin and Xi Jinping are like that. And if we can stop as much of the oil from being sold from Russia as possible, that's going to put a pinch on the people, like hands down. But at the same token, how much can the people of Russia truly take before they start standing up against the Russian Federation, before they start taking things into their own hands and not just protesting, but taking the fight internally to Putin, to the oligarchs. And half the Russian military is already on board saying that they don't even agree with this Russia-Ukraine war anyway. So it's just a matter of turning the tide and getting the power back to the people of Russia and give them a little bit of wiggle room to start fighting back.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
No, you go, because I want to hear what you have to say.
I guess I just wanted to like add a quick note that although in terms of like information censorship and all of that, Russia is not very unique. I think there is one dimension that in which it is very unique, and that is demographics. So Russia is a really big country with a relatively small population. It's like freaking enormous. So in some cities, you know, obviously this is hyperbole, but like, you know, some cities almost have as many cops as they have people. So that is one thing. And also the Russian population is pretty old, and, you know, boomers just, a lot of the time they don't really care about what's going on, period. And, you know, they certainly ain't gonna go out there into the square and fight anyone. So that is, I think, another impediment to the popular uprisings in Russia. So I think we'll have to rely on big cities like Petersburg and Moscow a lot of the time, regardless, I'm pretty sure.
I also think that it's not particularly in America's interest for something like that to happen, because they've been trying since the 60s to ensure that that doesn't happen on American soil. So
go ahead, Sal.
I mean,
Alucard, I want to push back on, like, or just kind of give you some clarity, like in regards to like the NATO thing, like the drawing the line in the sand. Like, why would we defend Estonia or Latvia or Romania? But we're not like exactly going in and defending Ukraine. It's more the fact that, like, we've created an alliance that is a defensive alliance, right? So because Ukraine is not part of this defensive alliance, we cannot go into another country as a NATO force, right? Because then if we do, now that gives, you know, Putin the right to say, like, hey, now you're an aggressive force, right? Because now you're not just a defensive force, right? You're not just defending your own territories and alliances. Now you're an aggressive force. And now, you know what I mean? Now that argument has, you know, is valid. Whereas he was trying to use that argument, but it didn't exactly work because you guys, like, Ukraine wasn't part of NATO. So you can't say that we're aggressing into Ukraine. You know what I mean? So, like, if we do that, then he's going to see that, and we're going to start World War III, and then there's going to be nukes flying. So it's a very delicate situation. And the reason why, like, we would defend Latvia, Estonia, and whatever, because if we didn't, then NATO would fall apart, right? Because then it's really like, what is the point of this? Because now we're not defending the countries that we promised to defend, right? And go ahead.
But like, in terms of like utilitarian calculus, if you will, NATO falling apart is probably better than nuclear holocaust, isn't it?
I mean, I guess yeah, in a way, but I mean, like, I personally would want to, like, hold true to the pact that we made, you know, and you know, be able to and try to defend as much as we can that line in the sand that's already been drawn, you know.
And also to like the NATO defense thing, it depends on like where we think the calculus is. Like, it's not as likely that they're just going to start firing nukes off if they invade like one of these smaller countries like Latvia, Estonia, and something, and all NATO's there for is as a pushback force. It's more likely that they'll start firing nukes off is if after they rout whatever's left of the Russian army, they start pushing into Russian territory. So as long as it's purely a defensive thing, I think it is certainly less likely for nukes to fly. But realistically, like, any armed conflict between NATO and Russia is probably going to be it for everybody. Because as we've already seen, like, Russia doesn't have anywhere near the military capability to fight NATO. Like, they can't fight really Ukraine, and they're like nowhere near as well equipped to fight NATO.
Yeah.
Okay.
Even if that weren't the case, just really quick, I was gonna say, even if that weren't the case, kind of like to what No Justice was alluding to, it's just going to be more poor people being sent to fight and die. So it's kind of a like the proletariat, or like rather the regular working class people lose no matter what, because they're the ones that are going to be out there dying for other people's money.
No, that's a fair point. All right, I just want to say, everyone, that if you have any final points to make, go ahead and make them now. We're going to transition to the next topic.
So the only last point that I'll toss out there is we're spending a lot of time talking about the NATO portion, and that's what we should. But when we're concerning ourselves with what's going on with NATO, whether Ukraine becomes a member of NATO, who's violating what, why is it that we're not really addressing the fact that Russia violated the Budapest Memorandum? And the catch-22 is Russia has a pretty big seat on the UN right now, but what exactly are we doing to hold them accountable for violating the treaty that's been in place for almost 30 years?
Would you mind, for people who aren't aware, what does the Budapest Memorandum say, I guess, like in a summary?
So the main summary is there was an agreement because Ukraine had a nuclear missile at the time, and the agreement came into place of Ukraine would hand that nuclear missile back over to the Russian Federation on the contingencies that Russia would not invade or try to pursue any sort of takeover of the Ukrainian territory. And that had the backing of the US, the UK, Northern Ireland, and the Russian Federation.
Okay. Any other final thoughts?
Just one thing I should have mentioned in my opening statement, but forgot to mention, was that there just needs to be a better. We need to be more equipped to deal with the refugee crisis that's going to ensue, especially in European nations. Like, they need to stop being racist at the border and just turning away African students because they're the wrong skin color. The UK needs to remove the visa restrictions. At the moment, we're only accepting people who have family in Ukraine. We have the most ludicrous foreign secretary. She's called Priti Patel, and she's one of the worst people who's ever been in government, as far as I'm concerned. She's a rancid monster, as far as I'm concerned. And we need to be doing more to, again, obviously humanitarian aid is one thing, but relaxing border controls to be able to absorb more refugees into the greater European Union, and obviously the European landmass, in which the UK technically falls underneath, I guess, in kind of the abstract. This needs to be done. We need to be extremely forthright in our desire to accept refugees.
And that's a pretty big stain on Poland at the end of the day, for them to kind of have that be happening at their border. It seems like they were somewhat also enforcing it, but shout out to Romania for not being assholes. Seems like they were letting everybody in, regardless of skin color.
Doing the jewelry checks that they were doing with the Afghan civilians. And also, we have to get this done now. Like, she's right. Like, the humanitarian aid. Like, right now, it's the last count I saw yesterday was 1.4 million people. This is the first wave. Like, inevitably, as if this continues and there's no ceasefire and Ukraine as a country kind of collapses because they capture the capital, there's 45 million people in Ukraine. That second wave we're probably looking at 10 times the size of people. And if we don't have any system in place now to get it, like, it's going to be chaos, and it's going to rise a whole line of hardliners to take power in places where they wouldn't have had a chance simply from fear mongering this type of stuff.
Right. All right. So we are now going to transition topics. Thank you, everyone. So our second topic is along this NATO line. And obviously, none of us are mind readers, so this is everyone's just their own personal speculation. Keep that in mind. Should Putin be afraid of NATO? And was that the real provocation for this conflict, as he has said was one of his reasons? Or was it just an excuse for him to expand his territory of the Russian Empire? And I want to say that as we start opening statements this time around, let's try to keep every opening statement to about a minute, so we're not getting too long in the weeds with opening statements. We're gonna start with Fresh Faces New Ideas this time. Why don't you go ahead and start us off?
I mean, like, NATO isn't aggressive in the same way Russia is. I mean, obviously, it's a lie of how we use it. That's why we have had multiple different reasons for them going in. I mean, if he's afraid of NATO, it's because he's realized that we actually have like a functioning military and can actually fight them if they tried something. But no, it's he's lying about it. But the same reason they were using the denazification, he said that this is all Russian territory. Like if you're flipping through multiple different arguments for your justification through multiple days, your justification is probably bullshit.
Okay, next we're gonna go to Hardwood and Sock.
Yeah, so in the beginning, like before the invasion actually started, I think that there was some validity to, him being worried about, Western democracies, basically aligning up along his border. But then his speech happened, and then he's like, I want to go full blood and soil. Okay, cool. All right. So obviously you were just full of shit. And then like he tried the denazification, which is, I liken that to like us going into Iraq. He's tried everything under the book. I think like it's a multifaceted issue. I think, maybe he's worried about Western values coming closer. Maybe that's part of it. Maybe, he's really worried about what's going on in the Donbass region. Maybe he's trying to, build up his legacy, and show that I was a strong Russian leader. And, another thing is it just disappeared. Cool. Yeah, I'll wait for the end.
All right. A la carte Hex, what is your take on Putin's motivations here?
Well, so I think the sort of the military dimension is just complete horseshit. There was 0% chance of NATO ever attacking Russia. On the other hand, Russia has in fact attacked a few places over the years. So, I mean, yeah, it's pretty ridiculous to bring that up. But I think in terms of, I guess, in terms of like Putin's like sovereignty type of conversation, where it might be damaging for his image to have like another Western liberal democracy right on his border, that would be pretty fucked up. That would further delegitimize him. And plus, it's also dangerous for him to like show a moment of weakness, because Ukraine hasn't been the only place that has been trying to like slowly sneak away from the Russian sphere of influence. We've seen that in Moldova and Georgia, which just applied for the EU membership. We've seen little bits of that in Armenia. Kazakhstan has denied to give our boy Putin troops, and plus they've just had these like massive like protests that turned super violent, but they died down. But still, that kind of showcases that place is also like ready to blow in a way. So I think this is like a critical juncture for him, and part of the reason why he's acting so unhinged is because, if he shows weakness here, then he might just be super fucked from all directions, domestically and internationally. Him, the man, not the country. So I think this is ultimately all about Putin's ego.
Okay, fair enough. No Justice, you're next.
So it's a kind of catch-22 really, in that obviously eastward expansion of NATO is just kind of going against the Gorbachev agreements in the 90s, but it almost feels incredibly vindicated. Obviously, I understand, Russia wouldn't be happy with there being, essentially a militarized presence from other Western countries along its border. You can understand why the Russian why Putin would be frustrated by that. But then by going in and invading Ukraine, it's just vindicated all of the NATO expansionism eastward. So it's a credible catch-22 there. As for his own motivation, I do believe that it is mostly geopolitical in nature. Obviously, there's plenty of excuses that he's given with regards to the Donbass region, denazification. But obviously, with the vast majority of those eastern countries in the previous Russian sphere of influence wanting to move towards the European economic area rather than the Asian economic area, has obviously been influential as well there too. So he's clearly has ulterior motives. To which I think that even if NATO eastward expansionism is a cause of it, by engaging what he's engaged in, it has vindicated those decisions to move NATO eastwards.
All right. Next, we want to go with James. What are your thoughts on Putin's motivations here?
So I think his motivations kind of tie very, very closely with that of China and North Korea, to be honest. And there's not really any surprise that he's deciding to make these moves after seeing what happened in Afghanistan. I mean, that was a huge show of weakness. And when Putin, leading up to this, his main concern was bringing up, don't make Ukraine part of NATO, and repeating that over and over and over. Well, looking at the underlying reason, why exactly is that? And the reason is he wanted to have the ability to impose his will on Ukraine, knowing that Ukraine was not going to be a part of NATO and not having to compete against the NATO force. And on the flip side, look over at China and what they're doing with Taiwan and the increased military aggression, North Korea with their increased missile tests and firings. It's all kind of pretty ironic that everything's lining up pretty perfectly at the same time. But when Putin out of nowhere is just hell bent on wanting some sort of assurance that Ukraine's not going to be a part of NATO, and he in turn invades, I think that his entire purpose for that is not only expanding the Russian territory to try to get Ukraine back, but at the same time, seeing what the global response is going to be to him taking these actions. Because by him kind of testing the waters, that's giving China and North Korea a pretty clear idea of what exactly they're going to face if they decide to move forward with their aggressions.
All right. And finally, Endless Cemetery, round us off here with your perspective on Putin's mindset.
I think it's a little column A, a little column B. I think Putin enjoyed having a buffer state between himself and NATO. So that's always good, like strategically when you're talking about like military tactics, but also, imperialism is the highest form of capitalism. So Ukraine has lots of resources that they would really like to enjoy having control over, which is, to me, the denazification thing struck me more as anti-NATO propaganda, the Nazi arming and training organization, because Ukraine has their issues with the Azov battalion and NATO did fund and arm them at one point. That is true. But at the same time, it's not as if Russia doesn't have their own issues with ultra nationalism, right? That's why the gripers here in America like Russia so much and they're like being Putin cheerleaders right now. It's because they're kind of really, really into that. But I think both things can be true at the same time.
All right. So we're going to go ahead and open it up to the full panel here. Again, feel free to push back on anyone else's takes, be contentious, but yet civil. Go ahead and start off wherever you want to.
All right. Sorry, I realized what I lost track of. Russia is also like a dying petrol state, as like the global West has moved more and more towards green energy and has less of a reliance on oil, which is basically Russia's, pretty much only export. I mean, right. Obviously they export other things. That kind of, now he's kind of under pressure, right, to try to expand, get more natural resources, to get more exports, so like that's what I mean. That's why I felt like it was like a multifaceted issue. It wasn't just maybe NATO was like a very like 5% piece of it, but I think that all those other things play like a big role in his decision to do this. Plus, I think that he's maybe lost his fucking mind. All right.
Maybe he's got like cancer or something, or long COVID. I've heard a long COVID period been floated.
Totally normal to have conversations with people 45 feet away on tables. I think that's something everybody does, especially when they're like your close advisors or other heads of states.
You've never had Thanksgiving dinner with your racist uncle?
I mean, how many people on 45-foot marble tables?
Well, yeah, fair enough.
I would love a 45-foot marble table.
It would be. It's just so swaggy, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
No, but like this is it's like the Nazification stuff is wild. Like least of all being the fact that Zelensky is Jewish. That seems to be like a pretty good counter argument to there. And like again, like plenty of countries have their own far right issues with nationalists. Like you can pick a country, you can find lunatics that you can pinpoint. I mean, granted, they have a little bit more of an issues. They've had some like foreign leaders that they've tried to make as heroes, but you could still point to pretty much any country to find that stuff. So it's not a good enough. I think most of it is probably done by him kind of being a little crazy, and then some economic reasons, because they like when they took Crimea and stuff, it was a lot of for economics. And that's why
so does anyone buy the idea that Putin has watched the US invade, right? I mean, they have invaded other countries in the past, and think to himself that maybe I'll be more vulnerable to that unless I draw a line in the sand? Would anyone buy that argument?
Annex Russia or invade Russia? No.
Because he's trying to sell his populace on this is a defensive maneuver that needs to be
done. They're taking notes from U.S. invasions previously to use similar talking points, but right. the thing that we're learning, like especially in the 20th century, is 21st century, is if you are a nuclear power, you're not going to get invaded. If you are a non-nuclear power and you get nukes, if you give them up, that's it. Like that's like the worst
basically
thing you can do. As long as so the problem with this ultimately comes, there's two options to this. It's either everybody is armed, or the world falls under a couple of large umbrellas with a few countries that basically protect everyone else from going.
That was a Freudian slip.
yeah, corporation. Like it's a large umbrellas for countries with nuclear power, because everything, like that's why North Korea is never going to give up nukes, because they know they're gonna, and they're also never going to invade South Korea. They don't have the ability to do that. Like, and China wouldn't let them, because they're like an effective way of keeping them as a buffer state. Taiwan is a totally different thing, and if should Taiwan get invaded, I don't think the sanctions. I don't think it's going to be
low key.
I don't think the sanctions we see on Russia are going to be anywhere near against China, because of how much more effective China's economy is tied in with the rest of the world.
One thing that I did find fascinating in regards to like China and this whole situation though, is like China's really backed off of Russia. Like they're not in full support like I kind of expected them to be. And like the only reason like I could think of was that like the messaging Russia's using to invade Ukraine, because Russia's always recognized or has recently recognized Ukraine as a sovereign country, right? Whereas China doesn't view Taiwan as a sovereign country. They view it as part of China, right? So like I think that might be one of the main reasons why China's really, backed off a little bit, because if they support like this invasion into Ukraine, right, it's basically like they actually see it as an invasion, where if they invade Taiwan, like I think we all agree it would be an invasion, China wouldn't see it as an invasion. You know what I mean?
Right. Now they're going to classify it differently when they're selling it to the global community. But I think China's backing off because they don't really want the same problems the Russians are having. I don't think Russia or China thought that the West would respond with this level of sanctions. I think that's why you're seeing China take more of a neutral stance right now. I don't think they want those same economic hindrances coming at them the way that Russia's being basically canceled on the world stage right now.
Yeah, I was gonna say like Russia and China have only really been in allegiance with each other like economically, and now Russia ain't got anything for them, so why would they?
It's also like hard for them. Well, the sanctions they're not going to get this anywhere near the Russian sanctions, because that would just collapse every economy. But I think it's also the fact that if Russia had blitzkrieg kind of in the way that they expected, and they had basically been in control of Ukraine by now, I think China would be a little bit more on their side, because the longer this goes, like the more brutal it's going to get. And that's optically more of an issue for them than it is for anything else. And so I think that's like Russia's clear military failures here, I think is more to point to why China isn't as full-throated in their defense.
Yeah, China, they've shifted more towards like economic and cultural influence more so than militaristic.
Yeah.
There's a reason why, it's countries like Venezuela that have looked into supporting Russia in these times, because they're already under so much duress with regards to economic power and with relationships with the West than China, which actually has a very good economic relationship with Western countries at this point in time. And the reason why China is staying neutral in this conflict and Venezuela is happy to be in full support of Russia at this point.
Apparently, the U.S. is reaching out to Venezuela as well for some oil. We're also reaching out to. Yeah, that's the thing. Like, but I mean, it kind of makes sense. Like, if you're gonna want to shore up whatever you can for right now, as the biggest, and we'll probably get to this in the next one, is like shoring up the whatever oil you can right now. If you do plan to cut Russia off, makes the most sense to like find an extra source of it. And I imagine the UK is probably doing something similar as is Germany, because it's the logical next step and it's the ultimate step that's going to take a while. So it might be good to move away from like an unstable state right now and find like more stability in the world.
Yeah. Almost a really good reason for fossil fuel divestment and a Green New Deal for a change in energy production.
Oh no, look, I
think you're getting questions confused from last night, my friend. We did that oil question last night. We're not doing that one.
Oh no, it's part of my answer for the next question as well.
Oh, okay, all right. Alucard, why don't you jump in here?
Yeah. Okay, so I guess on the optics angle, I think Putin like just fucked up big time during his like declaration of war speech, because I think China and all of these Hungary and these types of places were fully ready to buy the NATO copium, but then this guy comes out and he's like, hey, I'm bringing back the Russian Empire, and they're like, what the fuck, this guy is actually nuts. And I think that's like part of the reason why China is not only like not supporting but in a way backing off. Russia and Belarus just got pushed out of the AIIB because Russia doesn't really have a choice on whether they want to trade with Russia or not, Russia with China. So, they're fucked up, they're fucked either way. But the thing is, China doesn't necessarily have to deal with Putin. I don't think they support him as much. So basically, I think they wouldn't oppose the guy getting pushed out because he has demonstrated himself to be insane. And I guess on the whole, on the denazification angle and the DNR and LNR angles, I think the weird thing with that is that I think Putin actually like waited too long to cash in on that, because in like 2014-15, where far right parties had like at least, I think they had like maybe like 15% of the seats in the Ukrainian parliament and stuff like that, whereas now they literally have one seat in total. And the whole thing about Donbass shelling, I think everybody has long figured out that that is essentially entirely just bankrolled and supported by Russia. So it's really, I think the guy has actually gone nuts, because that was just an unbelievably stupid move. He turned away like almost all of his allies, essentially, except for places like Eritrea that are just like meme countries with like.
Belarus.
Yeah,
I mean, Belarus might be ending up in it. I think also the thing that we don't talk about enough is they sat there for like 2 months, and the Ukrainians are like, we're prepping in case they're coming, and they're like shocked that the Ukrainians are ready. I was like, you sat there for like, you stood outside of their house waving a bat saying, I'm coming for you, and they spent a month going, okay, I'm going to prep for you. They basically home alone their house. Like, that seems like to be a massive military failure on itself. And I think another thing you said was him waiting too long is when they first invaded Crimea, they like ran it over.
Let me push back on that a little bit, Fresh Faces. While they did sit on the border for a couple months with all those troops, Zelensky said himself that he did not expect a full-scale invasion. So they didn't really prep, like, I guess, like prep maybe the way that you're like trying to like insinuate right now. And this isn't really the first time that Russia's put their troops on someone's border either, and then not invaded. Like, they put troops on the border of Finland a few years back, and then nothing ended up happening through that. So I don't know that Ukraine really like prepared for a Russia invasion. I think they're doing the best they can, but I don't think they were really ready for this.
Not everything, but I think their populace was a little bit more ready. And maybe it was like a little bit of the propaganda videos and stuff that I remember seeing, but like the grandmas preparing in the streets and stuff for it, because of how much the alarm bells were ringing. And I mean, look, part of it was the propaganda. I imagine maybe at least from America, like when we were kind of spot on with the intelligence. We certainly didn't have the date right. We missed the date by like 2 weeks. but most of the other intelligence was pretty accurate, and I think that helped them like be a little bit more prepared.
I would say, just to respond to that real quick, I think it's possible that Zelensky was putting up a front just to keep investment into the Ukrainian economy going, because obviously if everybody thought that they were about to go to war, then the money flow would shut down. So that is a possibility. But, I guess, and
Real
also, I
Jaws
guess,
vibes.
as some
Panic.
evidence of that, I think that the survival of the Ukrainian Air Force kind of serves as the evidence of that, because if you guys remember, that first night the Russians were targeting the airfields and shit like that with the few guided missiles that they had, and Ukrainian Air Force still survived anyway. So I think that's some evidence that like they knew that something was coming, but sort of one, we'll not know for sure until like decades after this, when all of this shit is like declassified and all of that.
All right, we're gonna switch topics here in about like 5 minutes. So if you guys want to get any more closing arguments here on this topic, go ahead and get them in now.
So, the question that I've kind of got for you guys is, who's familiar with the treaties that Russia has with China and China has with North Korea?
To my
I'm not
understanding, they're just
super
economic
familiar.
treaties for the most part.
Yeah, that's what
trade
I thought.
agreements.
That's what I thought.
So the Treaty of Good Neighborliness and Friendly Cooperation that is between China and Russia, signed back in 2001, that does tie in the military component. And the treaty between China and North Korea for the Treaty of Friendship, Cooperation, and Mutual Assistance from back in 1961, that also has the military tie-in to it. And basically both of those flat out state that any of those three countries that wishes to invade or take military aggression towards a separate country, such as Russia and Ukraine or China and Taiwan, that's where they will not get the backing of the other two countries. However, if there is any aggression back towards Russia, back towards China, back towards North Korea, then that kicks in their treaties for military assistance. So when we're talking about China not looking like it's backing Russia, that's because they haven't gotten any true military kickback from NATO, from the US. They're basically in a holding position where they're literally just waiting for us to slip up or NATO to slip up and look for any sort of military aggression. And that's going to kickstart these two agreements, where even though they are two separate agreements separated by 40 plus years, they tie to each other. So from the China standpoint, as soon as there's any sort of kickback and true NATO military support for Ukraine or boots on the ground, then that's where China has full authority to come in as part of that treaty to provide that assistance. And that's where we're going to be seeing the entire game change. And that's, if you're wanting to talk about what's going to kickstart World War III, that's where they're at, is they are literally trying to get NATO and the US into a checkmate position with this Ukraine conflict and waiting for us to slip up to a point where they'll finally have the opportunity to activate their alliance between those three countries. And unfortunately, their alliances do expand to places like India, places like Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, and literally that's the biggest point where the situation that we're in right now, there's a very, very fine line of the support and everything that we can possibly do for Ukraine without truly triggering that point of military aggression. And Putin wants to fire back and say that these sanctions are already being seen as an act of war. Per their treaties, that's not the case. There's no US or NATO bullets firing at them. There's no US or NATO troops on the ground in Ukraine. So that's not activating their treaties. It's come down solely to the fact that he's trying to bait NATO and the US into getting boots on the ground and finding an excuse to activate these treaties.
So you're trying to tell me that a former KGB spy is trying to find a way to manipulate the West? I would have never seen that coming.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, Putin has been taking some pretty escalatory measures, putting his nuclear armament on standby, saying that our sanctions are already an act of war. Yeah, it does seem like he's kind of trying to like stir the pot a little bit. Does anyone have any final thoughts on this before we go to the next topic?
Do you know why he put the nuclear armaments on standby?
I don't, but I'm assuming it's because he wants to flex.
No, so it was because of comments made by the British Foreign Minister Liz Truss, the same woman who had been, before the war was declared, went to negotiate with Lavrov and said that she didn't recognize Russian sovereignty over oblasts that are in Russia because she's a fucking idiot.
Wow.
But she literally made comments on British TV, and the Kremlin said, "This is literally why we are making our nuclear armaments to ready because of comments made by her."
Oh,
she's an
rest in
incredibly
peace.
stupid person.
Wait. Is this equivalent to a dumber thing than what Lindsey Graham recently said?
I was just going to say, so Lindsey Graham is the only idiot then. All right.
Or to the new Trump quotes where we send F-22s with the China flag on them because
The difference is that Lindsey Graham and Donald Trump are not current secretaries of state, which is what Liz Truss is.
okay.
Oh. All right. Higher title.
She's literally
higher
our
office.
foreign secretary.
I will say before we transition this topic, I haven't spoken too much on my theories here, but I think that Putin has like two things in mind here. I did watch a part of his speech that he gave before he sent troops into Ukraine. It does feel very nationalist in the sense that one of the things he said in his speech was that he thought that Ukraine and Russia were one people and that that Ukraine does like owe them. So it seems as though he feels though he's entitled to this territory, that Russia is entitled to this territory, and that it was a mistake for previous Russian and Soviet leaders to relinquish their territory. So this almost feels like
nationalism, baby.
It sounds more like it's like Russian manifest destiny or some, nonsense like that. Also,
Ultra nationalism.
Yeah. Also, shout out to Real Life Lore. I mentioned this last night, but they did a great 30-minute video on this where they were bringing up some takes that I had never heard somebody else in this conflict so far. One of which being that Ukraine is apparently sitting on, I think, close to like 1 trillion tons of natural gas that was just recently discovered in the last few years.
They got hella uranium too.
Yeah. So
like Crimea or
actually,
some of it's in Crimea.
Yeah, Crimea. There's actually some by Kharkiv, and there's some in the western part, I think, south of Lviv. So it seems as though Russia might be going in there to do what every other Western nation does and suck up those resources.
Imperialism, highest form of capitalism.
Yeah. So it does seem like there might be a
liberalism for the
financial component for this particular invasion as well. But again, we're all just speculating here. So
And hence why my point about the European Economic Area, right? By them divesting from the Asian Economic Area, that just economically impacts Russia, unfortunately.
yeah, no, that's very true. We're going to move on to our next topic here. So we're going to, tweak this a little bit. The question is looking at how the US, particularly Biden, has handled the situation so far. Do you like him more, less, or no change at all? And for our one panelist from the UK, you can, kind of alter this to Boris Johnson and his approach in the UK. We're going to start with Endless Cemetery. I want you to go ahead and go first. Do you like the approach of Biden so far, and how does that make you feel about him any differently at all?
I think Biden is doing really the only thing that can be done. So I don't know if I can really commend him for doing what almost anyone else would do in that situation. But, I'm an abolitionist. So at the end of the day, I want the abolition of the United States government. So I don't really have an opinion on Biden one way or the other. But yeah, I guess he's giving what he's supposed to give. You know what I mean? He's doing exactly what he's expected to do. So.
All right. That's a fair answer. James, I want you to go ahead and go next.
So I'll kind of start out with, I honestly don't think that Biden really has made a very good decision since he has been in office. In terms of how he should have handled the situation different, I think that when Putin was going back and forth with him about trying to ensure NATO was not going to, or Ukraine was not going to become a member of NATO, I think that that would have been a very good opportunity for Biden to step up and tell him, okay, well, as things stand, Ukraine will not be a part of NATO. However, if Russia, if you decides to take any sort of aggression towards Ukraine, then at that point in time, we will bring Ukraine into the NATO alliance and use that as a deterrent instead of just telling them, no, it's okay, we're not going to do anything, or we're not really sure about it at this point in time. Because all Biden did was give Putin exactly what he was wanting, and we're all seeing exactly how that's playing out. And unfortunately, that's playing out in the loss of lives in Ukraine.
All right. So next, we're going to go to No Justice.
So I can't speak to things leading up to the conflict with regards to what Biden's done. I do not know, so I can only go by what James is saying there. But as since the conflict has broken out, I think that I've just seen reasonably okay actions from Biden. I think I agree with Ender Cemetery and that he's done what most leaders would do. And considering that my expectations for the Democratic Party on foreign policy are extremely fucking low, he's very slightly exceeded that. And in general with his foreign policy decision so far, which is better than I expected. As for Boris Johnson, I think is so far with regards to his opinions on the no-fly zone, he's actually explicitly said no, which I think is a good thing. As for the sanctions, he's been pathetic. He's allowed all the Russian oligarchs in which he's tried to sanction, he's given them time to sell off their assets, which defeats the whole fucking point. Literally is allowing Roman Abramovich to sell Chelsea Football Club. Like, what he's selling it, he's keeping all the money. That does nothing. That literally does nothing. And with regards to the acceptance of refugees in a post-war world, the entirety of our government have been pathetic. It's been, quite frankly, an insult to the people of Ukraine that we have not been accepting of refugees, that we've been taken so long to even approve visas for people who have family in the UK. Outside of that, the response has been, quite frankly, absolutely ridiculous from the Conservative government, as I would be expect, as we're just being run by clowns in this country, quite frankly.
All right, Alucard Hex, what are your thoughts on the Western response so far?
So for the Western response, I think I'm broadly okay. For Biden specifically, I don't think I'm very impressed because the United States has only gotten the temporary protected status thing through, which it basically just means that Ukrainians that are already in the US will not be deported, which is not a whole lot, less than what the EU is giving at the moment, less than what Canada is giving at the moment. So I'm pretty disappointed with that in terms of refugee rescuing. In terms of the sanctions, I think some of them have been okay, but the bigger stuff like SWIFT, honestly, that wouldn't have, that wasn't for the US to decide in the first place. So I think that was largely contingent on support from countries like Hungary and Serbia and Cyprus. So I think on that end, once again, I think the only reason that ever went through was because Putin just went nuts and, decided to, I don't know, go full anime villain in his declaration of war speech. So, and also even for a lot of the sanctions that have been raining upon Russia in the last couple of days, a lot of those have just been private companies deciding to pull out of the market for one reason or another, but that wasn't like a direct thing by the US government. So so once again, with the Biden administration specifically, lastly, also the jets thing, I don't think they've been pushing that hard enough. So basically with the Biden administration specifically, I am not very impressed. With the West overall, I think it's been fairly okay.
All right, Hardwood and Sock, you are next. What is your response?
All right, so this is going to surprise a few people here, but I think Biden's been fucking based, okay, about his response to this, okay? I don't like Biden, all right, but I feel like his administration is doing all that they can do in this situation, right? Like they're sanctioning as much as they can. They're trying to give humanitarian aid. They're giving military aid, aside from boots on the ground or jets. They're like steadfast on no boots on the ground. They're steadfast in no to a no fly zone, and like that's great, you know. And what's actually been super frustrating to me as a, you know, quote unquote Trump supporter, right, is, you know, seeing people who are Trump supporters basically being like, oh, this wouldn't have happened under Trump. I've been getting in arguments all the time with like people on quote unquote my side. And like I've actually changed a few of their minds, which is cool. Because it's like, what one thing like I actually support is like, hey, you know, give humanitarian aid, just let's not go to war. And like I'm like half surprised that Biden didn't actually put boots on the ground in Ukraine. You know, and I'm pleasantly surprised. And I think that's great. I think that we just need to hold the line, you know, like not necessarily go too far on the sanctions to where like it completely, you know, hurts us and other people's other countries as well. In regards to sanctions, like I know we're going to get into the oil conversation. You know, like I think what we're doing is great. It doesn't mean I like him anymore. It just means that, you know, hey, on this one issue, I can't criticize him that much. You know what I mean?
Okay. And finally, Fresh Faces, New Ideas. Go ahead and round us out with your perspective.
I think like the ability to have gotten out the information that they got out about Russia's movements, I think kind of like trying to rally the West, they did a good job. I'm less impressed with the internal stuff. I think, as I alluded to earlier with No Justice, I think the State of the Union would have been the perfect time to argue for a shift away from fossil fuels directly as a way of national security. And him not bringing that up, I think, is a failure. Although I have a problem with the State of the Union just in general. The refugee stuff, I don't know how much the U.S. has done to bring people over. I think the UK has gotten like 57, I believe is the number I thought I saw. I don't know if that's accurate. I do know that if they try to do that, I'd be very curious to see if the fervor to these immigrants is that these refugees is the same that we saw after Afghanistan. I doubt it will be. But look, I think the overall the sanctioning has been okay. The rallying the West together kind of, he seems like he did a solid job. I think the U.S. is the one pushing the planes through. I don't know why it took an extra week for them to figure this out. That seems like it would be a simple thing. But my biggest issue is the failure to tie this directly into a shift into green energy.
All right. So now we're going to go ahead and open up to the full panel here. Anyone can respond to anyone's take. And yeah, have at it, everyone.
All right. Fresh faces. Let's get into the oil conversation. All right.
All right, good. Because I know you've been chopping us good for this.
I just put it throw out. I feel like everybody's low key kind of based. We've all had pretty good takes, I think, but I want to see y'all get into it. It's gonna be entertaining for me.
All right. So while yes, I could agree with you that hey, we should push, you know, like away from fossil fuels maybe a little bit here, but I mean, I would have liked to see him come out in the State of the Union and be like, hey, we need to produce more oil here domestically. All right. I would have loved to see that, because in order to get away from fossil fuels in this current moment, it's going to take so long. Right. So whereas we can try to ramp up production, try to ramp up, you know, more imports from, you know, Saudi Arabia or whatever to try to like alleviate our issue, which I know we don't get a ton of oil from Russia, but to try and help us out a little bit, right? And if we produce more domestically, well, then I would be like, hey, let's get away from Russian oil, you know, but we don't do that right now.
If I could interject, I think that we could actually, if the motivation and the money was there, we could pretty fairly quickly transition to green energy. But go ahead, Fresh Faces.
And actually, he's right. The money already is there. So let me push back on this. A couple things. I think that I want to be clear. I'm not saying that we drop all oil independence immediately. That's asinine. That would basically collapse every country if they attempted to do that. I think that we're doing this in two ways, and I wish that green energy was the larger push. So I think the fact that they're reaching out to like Venezuela and Iran to get some of the oil reserves, I think is a positive step. I think that also we have to acknowledge that our natural gas output is higher in 2021 than it was in 20. It's going to be higher in 22 than it was this year. It's going to be higher in 23. So the idea that like the federal government, which only controls something like 26% of all land for fracking can really produce that much extra energy, I don't think is possible. I don't know. I haven't looked directly into the numbers, so I don't know where we are ultimately in our ability to reach out and produce more oil. I know natural gas, we're already slated to do more. Now, as for the ability to move it into more effective green energy, as I alluded to last night, the largest land auction for energy just took place. It was a $4.37 billion to buy a piece of land off of New Jersey and Long Island for a 3-mile island to build wind farms. This is currently a thing that's being ramped up. The thing that I wanted from the Biden administration was to point out how the actual U.S. military and the Pentagon has said the number one threat to the future of this country is climate change, and that's why we need to pivot into a full-scale both nuclear, green energy push, and that needs to be done now because it would both increase our job production, it would decrease our dependence on foreign adversaries that we don't really have control over. It would take us out of the actual cartel that is OPEC, and it would allow us to be more stable as a country. I believe that, and I think the way he should have phrased this is, look, I understand gas prices are going to be high for a little bit. That's why I'm going to do either some type of extra set of taxes that we can take away from the fossil fuel companies or threaten their subsidies, because they're all producing massive profits anyway. So they don't have to be jacking up these prices to do the things that they're doing. So I think there is ways for him to have said this that are be like, look, I acknowledge that it's going to hurt people. And maybe if it came down to it, he said, look, we're going to do these other things, but on top of that, I'm going to send you another $1,200 stimulus check. Like, there's ways around this that I wish he had done that I think would have been effective.
James, very against stimulus checks. Hold on, James. Come on in.
Also, I was just going to say, as far as I'm aware as well,
reparations.
I know both in the UK, I know in the UK for certain, I'm pretty sure in the US, all of the unions that represent like the coal industry and the oil industry, these unions are on board with
if by
a move
unions
towards
you mean
green
Joe
energy.
Manchin, then yes.
Well, all the coal miners in Joe Manchin's state have said they are for the Green New Deal and for Build Back Better, which he killed.
Exactly, as long as on the proviso of like a state retraining program, if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm.
I believe so, yeah.
Go ahead, James.
That's
Tell us
the
why
case
stimulus checks are the wrong answer.
So I'll start with the stimulus checks, then going to roll back to the transition between fossil fuels to the green energy side of things. So when it comes to the stimulus check portion, those had a purpose in the very beginning. But by rolling out these multiple stimulus checks and basically providing free money to the American citizens, that's not only caused inflation to take off.
I don't know about that one,
No,
Chief.
that's not accurate. That is not accurate.
I don't know about that one, Chief.
Wait, hold on. When you talk about the checks, we're not talking about the child tax credit, right? That's a totally separate thing that we're not talking about, right?
I'm just talking about the stimulus checks.
Okay.
And the main reason for that is because of the fact that the amount of stimulus checks that have actually been sent out, there is so much wasted money from the past stimulus checks that was not ever received. The Biden administration is wanting to funnel more and more money in to these stimulus checks to send out the free money, which has shown is keeping people out of the workforce, which is causing the economy to start heading into decline. And the inflation portion, we can disagree on that all day long, but there's a reason that the inflation right now is the highest that it's been in over 40 years.
Oh yeah,
and
capitalism.
Yeah. There's
there's a lot of reasons behind it.
Yeah,
but,
hold on,
because a lot of companies made record profits. Am I wrong about that, or
no? It's a supply chain issue. It's a supply chain issue that led to a lot of it. It's not just giving, like, studies show over and over again, if you hand people money, it affects their lives positively.
Increases the buyer power of the working class.
I'm
The biggest consumers by percentage are the members of the working class, are the people who then spend all of the stimulus money you give them. It goes back into the economy and it stimulates economic activity.
Yeah, if we're talking
some disagreements on the panel.
Just off of there's two perfect examples. First off, this is the broadest example, and this is like the biggest failure, I think, of like messaging. the child tax credit raised something between 12 and 20 million children out of poverty. And in the 1 month that it dropped, in the month of January, 3.7 million children fell into poverty in 1 month because we stopped sending them somewhere between, I think it was like 300 to 600 varying on the kid. And this is entirely due to like 17 people that this is happening.
That was also 10.2 billion that was given to the illegal immigrants that came up here that received the child tax credit without even being a citizen of the United States.
The question I have really quickly about all this is, can we define like how exactly inflation does happen? Because in my understanding, in a consumer-based economy, when you give money to consumers, that should prop up the whole system, right? Like, how would that be a net negative by giving the consumer class more money to consume?
Oh, it's because the people who own the means of production and own everything say, oh, you have more money. Well, guess what? I want more of your money, so I'm going to charge more.
It does seem like there's a huge hint of price gouging going on here, because you can't if you're raising your prices, that would say to me that you are feeling constrained somewhere along your supply chain. But if you're at the same time as you're raising prices, you're also having record profits. It doesn't really support the whole argument of, giving people extra money is a bad thing.
And the other example is we just had the in California. I want to say it's Stockholm. I always forget the Stanford. They gave people $500 for like a year.
California. Yes.
Yeah. And they followed what they did with it, and they gave them like $500 every I think it was a month for a while. They tracked these people for a while where they did, and they found like almost no waste, and it improved almost everyone's cost of life. Like, this is why Andrew Yang is like should have been better, because he was offering an actual policy that could have helped people. He's just a bad politician.
I'll tell him that if I meet him.
Please, I know you've contacts with the People's Party, and I do want to talk to them, because I read his original statement. And it kind of sounded like a child wrote it. But like giving money has overall been proven time and time again to be effective to helping people.
Sock, I know you want to jump in here. Go ahead.
I know we've gotten away from like the energy part of this, and
okay.
James, I do want to say this in general. I would love to have an actual conversation with you about like your entirety of your campaign at a totally different time. I think that would be a really good thing if you want to do that in the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So like in regards to like the inflation shit real quick, before I bring it back to, Ukraine and whatnot, because I feel like that's the main topic. While yes, there probably is like a slight increase in price that a lot of these companies are doing to drive up profits, like there is still a massive supply chain crunch, right? You have to remember that during the pandemic, like before the pandemic, we were largely like a service economy, right? We weren't like a commodity economy, right? Where we're buying, goods, right? And whereas after, or during, while we turn into, like we're buying all these goods that need to be shipped in, we're not spending as much money on services because all these places were closed down. You don't necessarily want to be around people, like your life changed, right? So now, like if you're just going by supply and demand, well, the demand just like shot up through the roof, right? For all these goods, and the supply hasn't necessarily been keeping up, right? So when supply, it's like a big freaking circle, so like we can't just point to, oh, it's the companies, they're the bad guys, or, oh, it's only the supply chain issue. No, like the
just
companies
to interject.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, because I'm a freight handler, and I will say that it's a little of both. There's definitely extreme demand for labor because of COVID. So like at my warehouse, there's a heavy demand for other workers, right? Because we're understaffed. But at the same time, you still have capitalism where the manager is figuring out, okay, I need people, but I also want to pay them the least possible amount of money that I can without them all deciding to quit at the same time. So I just want to throw that out there.
I hear you. We actually have kind of something in common there. I'm actually a local truck driver. So like,
hey,
what's up?
Hey, let's go.
But so to just blame it all on the companies, I don't think is the right thing to do. which is why I'm a centrist and everyone freaking hates me, because it's like you see everything that's happening, right? But anyway, going back to like Ukraine,
brave to be a centrist in this current society.
Oh, I love every second of it.
It's him and counterpoints. That's about it.
Everybody freaking hates me. But bringing it back to like Ukraine, like, and like relating that into the energy costs and whatnot, right? Like Fresh Faces, I believe you were proposing this. I don't know about other people, but getting off of Russian oil like immediately, right? But in doing that, like it's not exactly feasible at this moment unless we have that replacement for that oil, right? That's coming in, right? Gas prices are like going through the roof here, and I'm sure it would be worse in the EU where they get more of their energy supply from Russia, right, than we do, right? Like, so for instance, on Thursday, you know, where I live, gas prices jumped 20 cents in 1 hour and 8 hours, right? Like they started at $3.99. You go home from work, guess what? Hey, it's $4.20. You know, it's
Hey.
like $4.19 and like the 99 over 100. You know how they do that? I don't know why the fuck they do that, but
Right.
you know, so like we are seeing like in a disruption in the supply right now, and we haven't even cut off the Russian oil, right? If we cut off the Russian oil, well, then it's going to go up even more. You know, so it's kind of like what we're caught, and I'm sure the EU, you know, No Justice, I'm sure you could speak to this more. What like you guys probably even get more energy, like on a percentage scale from Russia than we do. So you would be fucking your own country too. So that's why it's such a hard decision to do, right? And I don't think that it's going to have that drastic of an impact on Russia's resolve in this conflict, you know, which is why I don't necessarily want to see that done, right? Because the sanctions that we're already imposing are enough to cripple the economy. I mean, yes, by cutting off oil would destroy the economy, but it's like, I think we've already done enough, you know, as far as sanctions, and over time it'll, you know, work its way out.
I'm going to jump in really quickly here. We haven't heard from Alucard or from No Justice in a while. Want Alucard, you to just jump in here first, then No Justice follow up after that. Jump into the conversation. You can reply to Sock, or you can just take it in a different direction if you want to.
Yeah. So I think in the United States, we're mostly fine. There are a lot of other places where we can find oil. Obviously, we'll go through some price increases. Right now, we're going through a price spike, but I think it will even out over time, more or less. I think the European Union and just Europe in general is a broader concern, because they're having like actual shortages over there in terms of like natural gas and stuff, where some places are like struggling to heat their homes literally. So that is, I think, a broader problem. I think we need to, you know, get these guys back on track, supply them with more of the American natural gas, get places like Germany off of their bullshit, and, you know, get them to kind of start using more nuclear, because, you know, I think it's really weird. They shut down all of their nuclear plants and now they are bringing back coal plants. Like nice.
Dude.
So yeah, I think
nuclear.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Nuclear makes me like so mad, and this is why them shelling that station is like so frustrating.
That shit's
like,
crazy.
Just on the fact that like we should be doing more nuclear, like that should be the only thing we're building. Is because just on the dumbest I'm sorry, this is like a really dumb tangent that I have an idea that could like potentially stop some things. Sea levels are going to rise to a certain level anyway. Like we can't stop that at some point. So like a really stupid person's idea to solve this would be to produce nuclear powered desalination machines and run them constantly in the hope that the thousands of gallons that we could turn into useful water doesn't end up drowning a city. Now, I don't know how effective that would be. It's just a pipe dream.
That's not very effective for several reasons. I'll touch on that, but then we have to get to No Justice next. The problem with desalination, which is why most countries aren't doing it, is because when you actually like pump water through the machines in that reverse osmosis way, you're also having to extract the salts from the water, which leaves a bunch of brine. And scientists
that
currently
shit fucks machines up.
They currently don't have an answer for what to do with that leftover brine, other than tossing it back into the fucking ocean, which would cause its own ecological problems. But No Justice, go ahead and join our conversation.
I mean, I think, and I agree with most people with regards to finding other ways of being able to obtain natural gas. There is a shortage in the EU. Luckily, in the UK, we have a price control. So, I mean, the prices have shot up by 50%, but the price cap has increased. The office that deals with that has increased the price cap, which is going to put huge numbers of UK homes below the poverty level because of the increase in prices. But it's going to become the point where we're not going to be able to rely on Russian gas anymore. We're going to have to divest at some point. And as for the solution to that, I will leave that to people who know more than I do about this issue. But there are plenty of European countries that absolutely correctly will not be able to heat the homes at all because of the lack of natural gas, which is all the more reason for a green revolution. But there will need to be at least some level of other supply that's going to need to be taken from EU states or European states at the very least to bridge the gap between now and when that future green economy exists, which it does not at the moment because there has been very little political will to do so.
All right, I just want to say, like, I'm very pro like green energy, like that's cool, but I'm just saying, like, in regards to response to the Ukrainian invasion right now, it's just like we shouldn't be making that drastic of a change, at wholesale, just to try, and really force the issue. Like, I'm fine, like, if we're like incentivizing that stuff, but like in regards to just cutting off Russian oil and energy, and then just going like balls to the wall, Green New Deal, it's a longer process. Yeah, it's a very long process. So it's like, that's what I mean. Like, we're kind of screwed right now. Like, yeah, we need to invest more in green energy, but we can't. That's just a long-term plan. Yeah. Like, it's not like a quick, snap of the fingers and hey, see you later, Russia oil. You know what I mean? That was kind of my approach.
The problem, though, I think with what you're talking about, Sock, is that I think our government has been dragging its feet when it comes to investing into green energy. And so while a full scale, like, let's go full Green New Deal right now would probably be the answer. I mean, they've been dragging their feet at every turn for this. And right now you've been seeing two Republican senators who are masquerading as Democrats, John Tester and Joe Manchin. They're now calling for extra drilling, which, in the short term might be the answer if you're trying to offset what you're, like capping off on the Russian side. If you want to send more oil and natural gas to Europe, who are so dependent on Russian oil and gas, especially over in Germany and Italy. But, in the long term, I just feel like it's going to be another excuse to not invest in green energy the way that we should be doing right now. I mean, we have to be doing, I think probably the real answer is to do both right now with a lot more energy behind it. I guess, like metaphorically speaking, because we're not putting a good enough investment into the future right now.
Right. I would say, I'm sorry, I was just gonna say really quick, just to kind of round everybody's stuff together. Like, when it comes to like hospitals and stuff like that, who are dependent on a certain degree of that type of energy, keep them going and like wean them off. But like the average citizen and like municipalities and stuff, I think would definitely benefit personally, but also, in the interest of combating climate change, to definitely go all in on that. But I'm the crazy lefty on this subject. I am the solar punk weirdo. So
I actually, one thing that we don't talk about barely at all, if ever, when it comes to green energy is geothermal energy. I would love to see us investing more into that. That actually might be like the holy grail of all energy, and it would probably be safer than damn near anything else and more effective.
All right, can I pop in real quick?
Yeah, come on in.
All right. I just wanted to bring this back to the Russia end of things, where I would say, in terms of weighing whether we should cut off Russian oil or not on the Russia end. So like, where it seems clearly that like the goal of sanctions right now is regime change. So you should sort of consider like, okay, I guess how likely is that us to actually advance this further? So for instance, like how many I guess Russian jobs would disappear if we were to sanction them in that way and stuff like that. So I think that is one dimension that we would need to consider. And frankly, I mean, I can't put that analysis together. I'm not like a big natural resources expert, but yeah, that's just, just bringing it back to it so that we don't just look at the American dimension of things.
Well, I mean, the fact that the ruble is less than a penny now, I think is probably going to have a larger impact than the fact that like they haven't done trading in a week. I think that's going to be more of an effect than us stopping it. And we're not going to do it overnight. We're going to have to first set up like because I agree, we can't just drop Russian oil on a dime. We're going to have to, I think, supplementing it with like Venezuelan or Iranian oil, whoever we find to pick up the pace. Well, it's not like we don't let them do whatever the fuck they want anyway, so who cares? Is going to take some time. So it and possibly may not even come to fruition because this thing might be over before we have all the supply lines and all the deals worked out anyway. I think the real issue was not starting to tie this into a shift to the green energy because look, the money is there. There is like trillions of dollars waiting to be unlocked and pushed into this. If we just like put tax credits into it, if we just remove some of the we focus on subsidies, if we put the physical government power behind it, like it's there. There's a reason that massive payday just came for wind energy because a group is going to pay that much money for wind energy. They're going to then turn around and say to all the governmental people, hey, look, we paid all this money for it. Give us some type of break for us to make a profit so we will continue to do this. And if it's for that, I'm okay with it. I mean, if we're going to have lobbyists for the planet and they're doing for green energy, I'm okay with it. I wish we had some nuclear lobbyists doing some more stuff. But the money is there. Like it has the ability to be there. I think, look, there is no really great answer. I think the truthful thing that Biden should have said was, look, this is going to hurt. We're going to do our best to make the pain as minimal as possible, either by finding other sources of doing it, either doing something with subsidies for the oil companies so that they're not jacking up prices, possibly doing suspending some taxes for citizens, like a gas tax or something, or sending you some type of stimulus, something. But we have to start moving away from this. There is no better proof that we cannot rely on foreign oil. Because look, the truth of it is, as much as you want to hoorah about American exceptionalism and America being able to funnel our own energy, we can't. We do not have the resources for it to sustain our way of life for an extended period of time. So like this, even saying that like, hey, we have the ability to ramp this up, it's a short-term solution. And I wish he'd just been more honest about that, because I think that first off decapitates literally all the arguments by saying, look, we have the ability to do it now. We're going to do it for a short term, but it's not a long-term solution. And then it solves the overall problem of us not relying on anybody else, because we can't.
Well, let me push back on that a little bit. I think we're going to kind of like wind down to our end here. We are currently energy independent. We have been for a few years now. So we do have a net export as far as energy is concerned here in America. So I'm not sure how long that's sustainable for, but we are currently operating in a place where we are sending out more than we're taking in. So I don't know that we really have a true dependence on foreign energy at the moment.
Well, we get 40% of our energy from Canada. I mean, it's not, I mean, I know.
We do import energy, but I'm saying we export more than we import. So
right.
I'll say
the big issue with regards to the United States is petroleum rather than
petroleum
rather than
is
like
the issue,
rather than energy generation, right?
Yeah. That's weird, because for crude we get like 7% from Russia, but for petroleum I think it's closer to 30. If I read those numbers right. But like either way, the whole point of it should have been, I get it, it's gonna hurt, but in the long run, even like there's so many ways to point to this, like just on the militaristic, you think that you're like, oh, China and Russia, the like people say China and Russia are the biggest threats. Like the military said like a couple of years ago, the number one threat to the US government is climate change. Like if we're going to put the another $800 billion into the military this year, let's, have them focus on building roads, building energy plants. We're going to spend this stupid amount of money.
We got to fund the police, Jack.
I mean, that doesn't really happen at the federal level anyway. I mean, that's more of a local and state government.
It does when you stimulate states, and then you vote against stimulating states so that the states can then use that money to fund the police. Yeah, that's when the federal government gets involved with it.
So
I was going to say it does throw entirely has shone light on 50 years of neglect and inaction on environmental issues, because we've known that these have been issues for an incredibly long time, but there's never been the will to do so because it's not been in the interest of capital. The market has not decided that it's good to do it until, you know, the entire fate of the world hangs in the balance with regards to climate change, right? We've just, I mean, in the UK, it was only a few months ago, we had protesters lying on, like literally lying on the ground in the middle of the road to try and get people to, the government to do something as simple as backdating insulation into homes in the UK. The house I live in is almost a century old and it's not insulated, and that is obviously increasing our energy bills, making it harder for me to heat my home. Huge amounts of housing stock in the UK is like this, and you know, suddenly we have an issue with natural gas and people can't afford to heat their homes. The heating bills are too high, moving them into the poverty range. That's an issue with, you know, successive states for an incredibly long time, successive governments not engaging in the level of investment that is needed to do so to prevent these kind of things happening, not just for climate catastrophe, but for our dependence on you know, foreign fossil fuels as well, right?
All right, thank you, everyone. I think we're gonna actually have one little mini topic before we close out, because you know this was a Ukraine panel, so I want to bring it back to where we started from.
Bonus meme.
Yes. So just really quickly, and I want to leave this like open, no opening statements, so just open panel really, but I do want to hear from everyone at one point. How do you want this crisis in Ukraine ultimately to end? What do you think the end should look like? I'm going to leave it pretty open-ended so that I can just, you know, let your imagination take place. Anyone can start. How do you want this to end?
Let the Ukrainian dude speak first.
Hey, thanks. All right. Well, I think it would be sweet if Putin and Lukashenko got dragged through the streets of their respective capitals. I think that would be the sweetest outcome imaginable. I really don't think that, you know, this needs to be the way it is. I believe that Belarus and Russia and everyone else in that sphere of influence can be free. But you know, obviously right now, it's a little bit difficult, which is why I'm saying, you know, give my boys more juice, push the guns through, get the jets going. Let's go.
Based.
All right. Anyone else jump in?
I mean, the problem I have is that at the point at which something like regime change is happening in Belarus and Russia, at that point where things are so bad that regime change is happening, how many Ukrainians have died at this point? That's the issue that I have, is the point at which things are so bad that the regime change is a possibility in Russia. There's going to be incredible amounts of deaths, both civilian and military, on both sides of the conflict. So I would rather have quicker peace sooner than regime change as a long-term goal. Although anything that ends the conflict, as far as I'm concerned, is fine. Peace is something that I think is the most important thing at this point, as I said. So if that involves some kind of negotiation with regards to the status of Donetsk and Luhansk, I think as part of the peace agreement, I will be willing to accept that.
I think that's where it's. I think ultimately I think Russia's gonna control those two areas, and then there'll be semi-autonomous zones or whatever. Like Russia said that they're republics. I don't even remember what he declared.
Independent states.
Yeah, independent. Yeah. So they'll be like Russian puppet states,
like autonomous zones.
I guess. No, they won't be their own states. They'll just bring them in like they did with Crimea. That is absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
They'll be their
that's
own
probably
states.
That's what it will probably be, and then maybe something on NATO. I don't know. Like I don't know how much further like they can get, because I think really the place where they really like Russia ultimately made the biggest misstep was moving beyond those two areas. I think if they had stayed in the Donbass and the Luhansk area, I think they would have been like accepted. But the fact that they pushed in further to try to like take Kyiv and take the whole country, I think that was ultimately their biggest mistake.
All right, somebody else.
I mean, ideally, I'd like to see Russia just fuck off and give Crimea back to Ukraine. But unfortunately, like, I don't think that's going to be reality. I'm actually very like doomer on it. Unfortunately, like I feel like Russia's resolve in this war is very, very strong. And I worry that it's going to collapse Ukraine as we know it today. And I personally feel like it's going to turn into Russia's Afghanistan. you know, in comparison to, you know,
Again?
America. You know, again, unfortunately, I think like the Ukrainian people's resolve is very, very strong. And I think the insurgency is going to be like, it's going to be insane. You know, I don't see Russia holding that territory for too long, but I don't necessarily see a situation that this gets resolved diplomatically, where Russia just keeps the eastern regions.
Yeah, the Ukrainians been fighting for their independence for fucking ever, so it's going to be a war of attrition, and you know, war bad. I feel like we can all agree on that take. So ideally, like Sak was just saying, ideally Russia would just fuck off, but I guess we'll see what happens.
One of
It's
the
also
issues I
like-
have is that if you do get a peace agreement based upon the autonomous regions of Donetsk and Luhansk, like the DPR and LPR being fundamentally recognized on a worldwide level, the issue I have there is once you've essentially given Russia what they want, which is encroachment into Ukrainian territory, both obviously with Crimea and in the Donbass, then that essentially vindicates their policy of engaging in military action with which to get their competitor nations to cede territory. And where does that dynamic end? That's an issue I have.
That's a great
Well,
question.
the
Really quickly
problem
though,
is
hold on.
that
Really
I
quickly.
look.
James, go
I-
ahead and give us your statement on
Like-
this before we jump back in.
So I gotta agree with Alucard is they need as many resources as possible to try to fight off and make the Russians suffer to the point where they exhaust their resources. And if that's shipping over any aircrafts, fighter jets, whatever that are about to be decommissioned here, at least they're going to be going to a good cause and some defensive strategies, trying to get Ukraine set up with the resources necessary for a Ukrainian Iron Dome to stop some of these missile attacks. Like, there's a lot that we should be doing for the defense of Ukraine as much as we can with all the resources that we can. And at the end of the day, it's going to either be Russia getting to the point where they've exhausted all of their resources and they cannot sustain any future advancement or invasion, and Ukraine gets their independence and their freedom back, or it's going to be some sort of a draw and there's going to be the allocation of the states, which that's still going to result in loss of life. And unfortunately, I don't see a perfect outcome. All I can see is giving Ukraine every single possibility and every single supply that we can to give them the best fighting chance at getting some sort of defense put against Russia and against Putin.
All right, fresh faces, go ahead and jump back in. Thank you, James.
Look, I know no justice like you. I agree with you that it would be like giving Russia what it wants to prove that they could like punch down and ultimately get what they wanted. But I don't know what the other option directly to peace would be, because Saka's right. It would be Afghanistan to Electric Boogaloo for Russia. And that is going to be devastating, not only to the Russian people who are going to be there and the ultimate collapse of their country again from just all the resources they're gonna have to pile, but it's going to devastate the Ukrainians. And like, as bad as an option it is, I think it's the only option because they overstepped. And unless they like, and granted, this is all based on the fact that they don't run out of gas like next week. And when we talk about like the Iron Dome stuff, it's kind of funny that like the Iron Dome would have made so much of a difference, but like the Russians have no missiles. Like they've only fired like close to 300 missiles, I think, in general. And like the Taliban fired more missiles than that out of Gaza anyway. Like, and they're building them in like sheds. Like the Russian army, like their missile level is laughable how little they have.
I mean, how about in Gaza?
Hold on.
right?
To be fair, though, they
Yeah,
haven't really wanted to do that yet. They sold their public on a peacekeeping mission, so they haven't really
but they've
treated this like
started to ramp it
Chechnya
up.
yet. They're not like going.
But if you were going to
like,
fire all your
missile
missiles,
yet.
you would have done it to fire them and take out the actual targets you were aiming for on
Like
the military
SAM
level.
sites.
You would have fired those.
I think that's what they try to do anyway, because once again, all the
Right,
guided
and they didn't
missiles,
fire off a lot of missiles. I don't think that they had all that many missiles in the first.
Yeah. They don't have a lot of guided missiles. But with that being said, to sort of bring it back to where we started, I think that the sort of LDNR plus Crimea to Russia peace deal is impossible because once again, as we saw from Putin, I think his primary drive in this conversation is glory, and he already shipped it with nothing. This is a disastrous war in terms of geopolitics, in terms of economy, in terms of really anything a sane person might consider. So for him to essentially sacrifice the entire economy and like tens of thousands of troops and only end up back where he started is impossible. He will never go for that. So I think once again, there's really I guess we don't really know what the situation on the ground is like. So it could always be that Ukraine will collapse like within this week or something, maybe. So it's all still unfolding. So I won't make like too bold predictions, but I think sort of in the grander scheme of things, I think once again, it's either regime change or Ukrainians get genocided or this war will just go on forever.
All right.
Like I agree with Sock in the fact that I think that occupation isn't on the cards. I think the insurgency war is I don't think is losable from a Ukrainian perspective, given the support they have with regards to technology, military equipment being shipped over from other Western nations, right? And the amount of territory that Russia would have to hold to engage to be able to keep an occupation going. It's not on the cards as far as I'm concerned.
You can't really totally crush the guerrilla tactics, and they would essentially have to establish like a complete police state, and I don't think they're going to be able to do that.
But how many people are they going to like take out in the meantime? That's like really the humanitarian cost of that is where like I'm like really worried about it.
Yeah, it's just going to be
if they're doing that like if they're going to try to like Iron Curtain Ukraine, like the refugee population, we're probably looking at close to 10 million at least trying to flee the country.
All right, so everyone, I'm going to go ahead and start transitioning us to closing statements. Before I'm going to just add my little 2 cents into here, moderator time. I would love to see that for those Ukrainians who do want to fight, that we send them the ability to fight. If they want to fight for their country, I think we should be supplying them some aid, including military aid if they want to use it. I think their only real path, because they don't really have the military capabilities to defeat Russia, but I think their best chance is to withstand as long as humanly possible and hope that this war becomes too economically disadvantageous for the Russians to continue this assault. If they start having to spend too much money on this, they might abandon it. But that's if the Ukrainians can hold out long enough for that to become a reality. But we'll see what Putin's really more or less willing to do as far as escalating this current conflict. With that being said, I want to go ahead and just start with everyone's closing statements. Go ahead and just say your final piece about this subject, and then tell everyone where they can find you at on social media and your various platforms. We're going to start with Fresh Faces New Ideas.
Hey, I am Fresh Faces New Ideas. You can find me at twitch.tv/Fresh Faces New Ideas. You can find me at Twitter at Faces Ideas. I usually stream Monday, Wednesday, Friday-ish around 7:30 to 9:30 p.m. As for my final thoughts on this, this is the second day of panels that I've been on for this, so I think I've been pretty clear about where I stand. This has been a disaster for the Russians. Their reasoning was nonsense. There's no clear end game for them. It's unfortunate that they're going to take a whole bunch of Ukrainians with them. We need to prepare for the humanitarian crisis of the refugees and the possible starvation that's going to come from us as well, especially because of how much grain that the Ukraine actually produces, and we didn't really talk about that. And then on the home front, look, I think gathering the allies, they did a good job. I think the ability to transition this into a green economy, I think we failed on that. At least as far as the messaging right now, it's possible that in the next week or so that they'll actually figure out how to do a messaging that anyone with like 17 minutes of foresight could have figured out like 6 weeks ago. But like, we'll see.
All right. Thank you, Fresh Faces. Endless, I want you to go ahead and go next.
I'm Endless Cemetery. You can find me at endlesscemetery.com. That's ENDLESSCEMETERY. I know that word be whipping some people's asses sometimes. I personally lost the spelling bee behind it, so I'm not going to hate. I also do a podcast called the Bolsheviks Podcast. That's BALTSHEVIKS with my housemate Robbie. We talk about Baltimore stuff. We talk about commie stuff. We talk about Baltimore commie stuff. Check it out. We're told, but we're funny. Um, yeah, my take on the whole thing is that war bad. I'm always going to stand in solidarity with the working class and poor and marginalized people everywhere in the world, no matter where they are. Um, just one take that I've been spending a lot of time combating is also, I would like to iterate very heavily that Ukraine is not a Nazi state. A lot of the people that get propped up as Nazi leaders were people who were literally thrown in concentration camps. So I would really enjoy if the people on my side on the left would stop being so intellectually lazy in that regard. But yeah, with that said, war bad. Abolish money, abolish the government, and yeah, I'll leave you with that.
All right. Thank you so much. James Boyad, you are next on the list here.
Yep. So you guys can reach me at Boyet4 Congress for my Instagram, and Boyet4 Congress .com for my website. And in terms of kind of how this entire situation kind of plays out, just kind of standing for the freedom of Ukraine and making sure that we're doing everything that we can to give them the best possible chance to get through this with as few loss of life as possible.
All right. Thank you so much. Next is No Justice.
Putin bad, green energy good, peace good, no fly zones bad, capitalism bad. Yeah, my No Justice MTG. You can find me at that one, that handle there on literally every single social media network. So that is Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. You can go check me out there if you want based anti-capitalist, Marxist, British politics, because there's not enough transgender Marxists on Twitch. And yeah, there's been an excellent panel. Thanks for everyone who's followed, from all the panelists as well, and people in other people's chats who followed. I really do appreciate all of that. And I appreciate the time put towards put this panel together, independent thought. Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Sock, you are next.
Cool. Thanks again for having me. Once again, I'm a retired streamer, so like you can find me in the chats of some drama stuff because it's enjoyable and you can just yell at people. But in regards to into this situation, like it's very sad. I love watching the resolve of the Ukrainian people, fighting for freedom and fighting for, their sovereignty. And like, it's really great to see. Obviously Putin is horrible. And I would like to see a diplomatic solution. Unfortunately, I don't see that happening. Alucard, if you have friends and family back over there, I'm really pulling for them, and I hope that they continue to stay strong for their country, and really like keep kicking ass. All right, because you guys deserve like your own sovereignty, your own country, and all that. All right. But thanks again for having me. It was great seeing the old faces that I've met, and then the new people I met here. It was a great time. Thanks.
All right, thank you. And of course, we wanted our Ukrainian panelists to be the final thoughts. So Alucard, go ahead and tell us your final thoughts on this subject.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Sock. So, I mean, I guess it's as I said, Putin is a bitch. Give my boys all the aid, all the guns, all the money that you can push out right now. I think we're in desperate need of that, especially considering, Russians have been slipping based on everything we've seen. So I think this is a major opportunity. But yeah, I guess for now, from here, I can only hope for the best. In terms of what I will personally do going forward, I think I'll get involved in some more panels on this topic. Maybe if I can get some momentum going, maybe I'll do like a charity stream or something. That is something that I have been sort of doing, in real life with my friend groups and at my university. I really want to get this going because, as Sok mentioned, I do still have a majority of my family and basically all of my friends over there. So it's a real mess. So I hope I can get that figured out. On the broader scale of things, I probably won't be streaming that much in the near future. But I will. I think I'll start to pick things up in the summer once I have my master's degree. So that will be a juicier time. And yeah, you can find me at twitch.tv/alcardhex, and that is my Twitter handle. Also, I haven't been tweeting or streaming a whole lot, but I guess I'll start to pick things back up little by little. I appreciate everyone who's here for having this conversation. Thank you, Independent Thought, for letting me come on, and Slava Ukraini.
All right. Solidarity to the Ukrainian people who are fighting for their fucking freedom right now. I want to go ahead and just end this topic by saying just a little piece on mine. I did an episode on this on my podcast just this week. I talk about the Russian invasion of Ukraine, all of my takes on how I felt about Putin's invasion of Ukraine and how really planned out this has all felt. Like this felt very orchestrated for a very long time, in my opinion, but I'll let you hear my takes on my episode. If you want to follow any of these panelists and you are watching this on YouTube, I will have links in the episode descriptions for everyone's social media and for their Twitch channels. So go ahead and just drop in the episode description now. You'll see some links there. And if you are interested in seeing more panels like this, subscribe to my YouTube channel for more panel episodes in the future. Everyone who's on the panel today has an open invitation to come back for panels in the future. So if you would like to take that, just DM me, let me know. We'll set something up. Thank you for everyone who watched today, and we will see you in the next episode.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Yeah, take care, everyone.
Bye, guys.